and welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. Kremlin actively militarizes Russian society, making talks about possible war a new norm. This is especially disturbing, taking into account the powerful anti-American and anti-NATO campaigns in Russian media. This is the thesis of the survey done by the Hybrid Warfare Analytical Group of the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. To tell us more about this, we welcome in our studio today Ruslan Kavatsyuk. He's an advisor to the Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine for European and Euro-Atlantic integration. Hello, and thank you for joining.
Hi.
So tell us more about the survey.
Well, this survey gives us a perspective of 3.5 years of Russian narratives in top 3 TV channels.
Which are?
Which are ORT, First National Channel, and NTV. These are channels that cover 90% of Russian population news consumption. Also, we have top 10 news websites. And altogether, this combines roughly in 570,000 news pieces over these 3.5 years. And analyzing this vast amount of news, we found that Russia on purpose uses these news tools to build narratives about threat that is put against Russian Federation.
Coming from Ukraine?
Coming from Western foes. Basically, it says that the story is rather simple, that there is a West that is evil, and Russia is a stable, peaceful country, and this West is not stable, not peaceful, aggressive, and you have to watch after them. The West in these media is portrayed as the United States of America that is leading that West, that is equal foe to Russia, that is a global power, that is dangerous and has to be managed. Then there is NATO that basically equals the United States.
And is called a terrorist organization by Russian propagandists.
Yeah, there are a number of narratives saying that. And there is Europe, European Union that is fractured, divided, and decaying. And there are some countries around Russia which used to be part of its direct influence, like Ukraine, Georgia, Baltic countries, some countries in Balkans, Western Balkans. That are now trying to be part of the West, and thus they are portrayed as betrayers and basically managed from outside, not internally managed. So,
is there any information on how many Russian citizens actually believe this information?
Well, there is public information that we can see from sources like social surveys, Levada Center social surveys. We see that during elections period, these narratives are used to mobilize audience for presidential or parliamentary elections. We can see that over these 3.5 years, these narratives were used not according to the reality. For example, there were fighting wars in 2015 in Ukraine and then 16 in Syria. And during this time, these narratives were used, but not as much as in 2017 and 2018, when basically parliamentary and presidential elections happened in Russia. So we understand that these narratives are used to mobilize internal base for electorate purposes.
So basically, the main point is to unite the people of Russia in the face of an enemy.
That's right. One of the purposes is diversion.
Artificially created, basically.
Yes. One of the purposes is diversion, so that Russian population does not focus on internal issues. The other purpose definitely may be uniting around the leadership, around the Kremlin, so that focus is on external enemy that is a threat. And what is disturbing is that only 5% of Russian population speaks English, speaks foreign languages, which means that there is lack of possibility to influence from outside the narratives. Basically, internally managed media are part of this machine that is propaganda machine that are used in this hybrid war, communicating internally first and then communicating externally, because Russia Federation also has external media sources. And as from what we see is that all sorts of economic, financial, cultural ties with the West are being part of this wider hybrid war that Russia uses against the civilized world.
One of the tools that is used to deliver this fake news to the wide audience of Russia and abroad, let's be honest, is not actually news bulletins, but is talk shows.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Why talk shows?
Talk shows are used for several purposes. First of all, they create this feeling for the viewership is that there is a freedom of speech. There are different points of view discussed. People argue. People have no one point of view, but different ones. And also there are present certain opposition speakers, like certain Ukrainians or Americans or Europeans who come and speak at these talk shows. We see that these speakers, so-called speakers, they are the same people who come from one channel to another channel and are being abused and so on. And we've heard a number of times that these are paid speakers. But this doesn't matter for the audience. Audience watches the TV and trusts it, and thus has the feeling that there is a freedom of speech. That's the first.
Is media highly trusted in Russia?
That's true. We see that federal television is the most trusted media in Russian Federation, and the regional. Are
those real results or fake like the rest?
Well, we see the very, very high numbers, and then we see how these narratives influence the behavior of Russian population that supports its leadership during aggressive actions outside of Russia. That means that it is truthful information. We may hesitate how much truthful is it and how fast it would change over time if there would be no such propaganda machines used. But these are hypothetical questions. We know that 59% of Russian Federation citizens were 16 or more years old when Soviet Union collapsed. So it means that there is a large base of vast majority of people who were adults when Soviet Union collapsed. And it means that it is a base for potential use of propaganda tools more efficiently than in free societies.
Now, is there an world-renowned algorithm to battle, tackle, and fight such a propaganda machine as the one created by Russia?
First of all, we must appreciate the fact that there is hybrid war, and we must accept the fact that this hybrid war is using all kinds of tools that are there to win this hybrid war. Because from what we see, a lot of audiences in the free West countries do not accept that fact. A lot of audiences still hide behind this very comfort zone, feeling that everything is normal, business as usual, and so on. Until that is wider accepted fact, we will be an easy target. I mean civilized countries, free world. We see that over the last 4 years, there is much better understanding than it used to be. First of all, because Russia is advancing in that hybrid warfare, and more countries suffer from it. When in 2014 they've attacked Ukraine, a lot of countries were hesitant to respond fast. Now they've attacked the United States elections, they've attacked the UK using chemical weapons. They've attacked recently with cyber attacks Netherlands, Switzerland, which seem to be very, very neutral and peaceful countries, right? So we see that they actually attack those countries whether they like it or whether they want to admit that there is war or no. It doesn't matter how they behave, it matters what Kremlin wants, and Kremlin wants to have a hybrid war. The first thing to win a war is to admit that there is a war. And this research is targeted to help us all understand that objectively there is a well-managed machine that is using all sorts of tools to fight the war in Russia.
A lot of propaganda that comes from Kremlin is aimed at Ukraine. How does Ukraine specifically tackle this problem?
It's a more difficult question because Ukraine is not on its own a target. It is a target as part of a bigger plan.
Which is?
Which was publicly stated by President Putin back in 2006 in Munich when he said that the biggest catastrophe of 20th century for him was the collapse of Soviet Union. The collapse of Soviet Union, we should remind ourselves.
I'm surprised it's not world domination. I'm sorry.
The collapse of Soviet Union happened after when Soviet Union lost the first Cold War. Now we seem to notice that this hybrid war is basically trying to start this war again and have another winner. This is important to understand that Ukraine is only part of it. It's only one piece of it. And Ukraine is in a very difficult situation simply because we are very close to Russian Federation by geography, first of all. We have a lot of citizens who sympathize Russian Federation. 20% of our population still does not recognize that they may be under propaganda.
Are we talking about the occupied territories of Donbass?
No,
and Crimea?
The free country of Ukraine. Yes, and this is very, very, very disturbing. And we might say that it is a success in general that Ukraine is not occupied overall.
Wait, but how do we educate those people who sympathize Russia? How do we teach them? How do we show them that this is fake news? That Russia is using fake news to discredit Ukraine? Let's put it this way.
Well, fake news on its own don't work. Narratives work. Narratives are much deeper, much more influensive tool than fake news. Fake news is just helping to build it. And then the real news are used to twist them, to change the focus, to make people hesitate, and they support bigger narratives. And the bigger narratives, for example, about the United States is that the United States is evil, that is basically creating war around the world and benefiting from it, and has a goal to destroy Russia. And that is the narrative that is being put on the Russian society to get frightened and protect themselves. And when Russian leadership starts bombing Syria or elsewhere and saying that they bomb someone who's out there supporting United States or against the interest of the United States, well, people in Russia don't care that hospitals are bombed and people, children, women are bombed, because they say, well, this is a tool to protect ourselves, right? This is the way to build internal support of these kind of animal actions of Kremlin inside of Russia, based on the fear.
What could the outcome of the process of working of such a terrible propaganda machine be? Could Russia succeed in creating another Soviet Union, which would be more cruel and more bloody, if I may say that?
Well, I don't think it's a propaganda only. As I said earlier, it is different kinds of tools: cultural ties, religious ties, economic ties, financial instruments that are all used as part of one machine, and propaganda is only part of it. Propaganda helps...
What's the forecast, though? Could Russia succeed in doing all that, or will the international society finally stand up and give it a good fight?
Well, nobody knows. Otherwise, it would be too simple. We do have to understand that we have to fight this war. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we must find ways to win this war. And one of the ways is to understand who we are fighting with, what their instruments are, and study them, and then use efficient ways to counter their actions and maybe do something proactively.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for coming and clarifying the whole situation for us. That was Ruslan Kavatsyuk. He's an advisor to the Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine for European and Euro-Atlantic integration. Thank you so much for watching UATV. Stay tuned for more.